guys? Welcome back to Room 237, back with another review. And this is a movie that I am very happy to talk about. And this is a movie I've wanted to see since last August is when it was released. It premiered at some Sundance in 2020, but it was released here in the States in 2021 in August. And as soon as I saw the trailer, I thought this is the kind of movie that I'll definitely like. I'm very excited to see this. And in fact, recently I bought a film because I had a brain fart. I saw it at the store and I was like, oh, that's that movie I wanted to see. But then after I bought it, I realized, oh, that's the wrong film. And that was The Beach House, which I reviewed recently, which worked out because I really liked The Beach House. But what I thought it was, and now I finally got to see it, and it is great, is The Night House. You can probably see how I got those titles mixed up. Which is directed by David Bruckner, who he did a segment in VHS, which, okay, I guess, as an anthology, a bit overrated. But he also directed The Ritual from 2017, which is one of my favorite horror films of the 2010s. Love The Ritual. And he will be directing, and is really the only reason why now I'm excited for the new Hellraiser, which I believe is a reboot or remake that will be released on Hulu sometime this year. He'll be directing that. And he's excellent with pacing, atmosphere, building of tension and dread, and just uncomfort. And that's what this movie is. Now, I've read some reviews and seen some reviews where it appears that some people think that if a movie's a little too psychological or a little too slow, it's not a horror movie. It just has horror elements. I call bullshit. A horror movie's a fucking horror movie. Yes, this may be a love story at heart, a very good love story actually, but it's still very much a horror movie. I got elements of Hellraiser, kind of Jacob's Ladder, reminded me a bit. There was some other ones it reminded me of, but you mean to tell me The Shining, which is a bit slow as well, just has horror elements? No. This is a horror film. Doesn't matter how psychological or slow a movie is, it can still be a horror movie. I mean, there are people that say that, and I'm sure some people will try to call this like a psychological drama or something. It is very slow. It is something, and it is supernatural. It does, for the most part, deal with like a haunting or some supernatural entity of some sort in a house. But don't go into it thinking you're going to get, Insidious or The Conjuring, because it's definitely not that. It was also produced by David S. Goyer, who produced a number of DC films, including the Dark Knight trilogy, Zack Snyder's BVS and Man of Steel, and a bunch of other things. But it was written by, I do want to get the writers, because I thought this was a very well-written movie. Ben Collins and Luke Piotrowski, if I pronounce that correctly. And it stars Rebecca Hall, who also served as an executive producer, Sarah Goldberg, Evan Jonikite, if I pronounce that correctly, Stacey Martin, and Vondi Curtis Hall. Alicia Christian did the cinematography, which was excellent, and Ben Lovett did the score, who also did the score for The Ritual, and a number of other things. Also The Signal, which David Bruckner also did the score for, directed, and he did The Wind, another one of my favorites for the 2010s. I Trapped the Devil, another one of my favorites for the 2010s. And this. And this is now one of my favorite horror films of the 2020s. I mean, it's up there with The Invisible Man, The Feast, uh, among like my favorite. Censor, definitely Censor, as my favorites of the 2020s. Even other ones that I really, really enjoyed, I would put this above them, like Last Night in Soho, Antlers, Malignant. All of those I put over Malignant as well. I still like Malignant, but yeah. This is up there with some X-Men, not X-Men, X and Men. Those are all amongst my favorites of the 2020s. More so Invisible Man, The Feast, uh, whichever other ones, Censor. This is up there with those ones. I would say Saint Maud, but that was 2019. And it's really carried by Rebecca Hall's performance, which was excellent. She's this English teacher. I believe it was an English teacher. She's a teacher who, this is like a week after her husband, who was an architect that built their lakeside house, big beautiful house, had committed suicide. He committed suicide the week prior, and it's kind of her trying to adjust. A big theme of the movie is grief and kind of how to overcome it. I believe that's one of the metaphors of the film, or if there is a metaphor, I believe it's how to overcome grief, and it does it in a very good way. But as she's going through her husband's belongings, not really snooping, but kind of just to get rid of stuff, she comes across some peculiar items. She looks a little deeper and starts to find this secret life that her husband was living. And this is one of those movies where just when you think you have it figured out, it just keeps going deeper and deeper. And by the end of it, and I got to give this movie credit. I loved where this movie was going. And by the end, I was like, oh no, don't tell me that's the revelation. Don't tell me that's the twist or the answer or whatever. Which it was, but it did it in a way that I was like, oh, it saved itself. Not a lot of movies could do that for me. So, I thought it was well written. It is a very visual experience. And if you follow my channel, you know I'm not a fan of supernatural horror, especially ones since, for like 2000 on. There is the exception. I mean, there is Insidious, The Conjuring. There is stuff like that I enjoy. But for the most part, it just feels like crappy Blumhouse type supernatural films that I can't stand. This is how you do a supernatural horror movie. In fact, there was even parts that reminded me of The Entity from 1982, which is one of my favorite supernatural horror movies. And the pacing, I mean, I'm a slow burn guy as well. I mean, I love movies like The Witch, The Lighthouse, The Ritual, The Feast, The Babadook, which this is kind of like as well in terms of grief and dealing with the loss of a spouse. And just looking up on my shelf, I mean, Saint Maud, House of the Devil, It Comes at Night, The Lodge, Possum. Those are all some of my favorite modern horror movies, and this fits right in with its slow burn. And she starts, not only does she find evidence of this secret life, but she starts having these experiences both when she's awake and these dreams that are very well done. It's not a gotcha fake out dream sequence. I mean, the first time might be, but it's well earned. It earns all its jump scares. But it's mostly atmosphere and just this constant build of dread, and very suspenseful as well. and very visual. There were some visual things I thought were really interesting that I don't think I've seen done, definitely not recently, or in recent films. And it gets to the point where both she and we as the audience can't tell what's dreams and what's reality. You know, like at night her radio will kick on and it'll be, I'm guessing they're a wedding song, and she gets like texts and phone call texts saying come downstairs, but then like the next day there won't be any texts or anything, and she starts to believe it's haunted. And I I'm gonna say spoilers this early because I went into this pretty blind. I didn't even really remember what the trailer said it was about, and then all I did was read the back of it, which is a recently widowed woman starts discovering her husband had a secret life and discovers his dark secrets, and that it's more supernatural. That's all I knew about it, and I think that's the best way to experience it. So I'm going to say spoilers here, but I highly recommend it. I mean, even if you don't like supernatural films, I think this might win you over, especially in a lot of the ways it's done. It earns every bit of jump scare. And if you like slower burns where it's just this constant build up and just this sense of dread and just this slow reveal throughout the film exactly who and what her husband was, then I think you will highly enjoy it. If to you a horror movie is, a supernatural horror movie is The Conjuring or Insidious, or even piece of shit horror movies like Ouija or Annabelle or Paranormal Activity or, Blumhouse's Truth or Dare or shit like Bye Bye Man, stuff like that. If that to you is a horror movie just because it's constant jump scares, nonstop, horror movie elements wall to wall, then no, you're not going to like this at all. Mainly because it's good. That's me being cynical. But excellent, excellent movie. Unfortunately, I can't tell you why the visuals are so good because I don't want to spoil anything. I want to save it all for post spoilers. But the visual experience, the constant build, and the performances, and the writing and story itself is worth checking out. But now spoilers. So yeah, her husband shot himself in their boat, which is out on the lake. And some of her dreams consist of, hearing movement and voices. And at first, the first time I thought, okay, this is going to get interesting, is, well, first she finds a picture of a woman on her husband's phone that kind of looks like her, but it's not. And he's got these books. Some are more about dark arts. One is like an architect's journal where it has all the little plans he drew out for the house. But there's also one for a reverse house. Like the same house but mirrored. And she finds out who this other woman was. And it sounds like they had an affair, but not really. There's an elderly neighbor or nearby friend that tells her, tries to say, hey, there's nothing out here. Wait, I gotta back up a bit. Sorry if I'm discombobulated. There's a lot to talk about, but basically, okay. She finds evidence that, okay, he may have been seeing another woman or many. She goes to meet one of them at a bookstore where he bought these sort of dark art books. But she says, no, it was never an affair. She actually goes to meet her at her house. It says, well, he brought me to this sort of dilapidated house out in the woods, which is his reverse house, which during one of her dreams she sees across the lake. But then it's like it's not there. and there's this elderly friend that borrows their boat. He sees her hiking, and he's like, "There's no house out here. No, just you're grieving. Go rest. Don't worry about it." But she finds the house. It finds a statue of a woman that's kind of hog-tied with a bunch of rods going through her. She asks him, like, "What the fuck?" And he says, "Okay, I saw him once going out there with a woman. Yeah, I realized it wasn't you, and then he came knocking on my door covered in mud, saying he had urges, but he thinks he found a way to stop him. That's all I saw, and I never told you because he asked me not to." And then the woman says, "Oh yeah, he took me out to that house," which is unfinished. It looks dilapidated. So he started squeezing my neck, but then he started crying. He apologized, and then he drove me home. But it still seems like... So at this point, I'm like, okay, maybe he was a serial killer of some kind. And throughout most of the film, it does kind of make it seem like he's some sort of serial killer or sadist. But and I think it's before she finds the house, and just before she initially meets the woman in the photo, she has this dream where she's outside and she hears screaming and laughing, and we see out of focus in the background a woman run by, then another one, then one runs right by her, and right when they get to the cliff, they just kind of just fall off. But there's no music or zoom in to drag your attention to it, which is more atmospheric, and I thought that was very well done. Eventually she goes back out to the house and looks under the floorboards and finds a bunch of bodies. And so that's what I was like, okay, so he is a serial killer. But with these books and that statue, it makes it seem like, okay, he's doing it to fend off dark forces, and each time he does this position with the rods, the same as the statue, is supposed to fend off dark forces. So it was like, okay, is everything already haunted, but it just got to him, and he's doing it to protect her? Throughout most of the film, I was like, okay, he's a serial killer. It's a widow finding out through these supernatural dreams and occurrences that her husband is a serial killer. In a way, I was right, but it is a lot deeper than that. Because also, when things are happening, she can talk to it. She'll be like, "I'm here, what do you want me to do?" And there'll just be like this deep voice say like, "Go to the boat," or something. And like in the dream, when she sees the house and goes to it for the first time within the dream, she sees it's exactly like her house, but in each window it's him with another woman, and he's attacking her. But then there was this very interesting part, and this kind of reminded me of The Entity, and really where the film takes a drastic turn. After she finds the bodies, she takes a shower, she gets out, she kind of has a breakdown. She's like, Owen, her husband, like, "Where are you?" And in the steam on the mirror, it says, "Here." And there's this very, well done romantic moment, like where the music swells, where she stopped, she puts her hands out, and it looks like she's like touching his head. You see the indentations, the flattening of her hands and fingertips. There's like invisible fingers grazing her skin, and you see like her shirt get pushed up against her. It looks like her and this invisible force are in an embrace. But then she sees in the mirror, it's like she's seeing herself back too, but when the reflection turns around, it's another woman. It sees him attacking her in the mirror. And there was this great part where... we see this earlier in the film as well, but also in this scene and on. The architecture, and I thought this was very well done. Effective jump scare. And not a very loud jump scare either, I might add. But she'll just be looking in some direction, and there'll be like a pillar with some sort of, you know, molding or shaping at the top, and then like a bookshelf or something with the same kind of molding or woodwork at the top. So the way she's standing, it's like they're like connected in the shape of a profile, a human profile with darkness in there. So it looks like just a dark person is there because of the shape of the architecture. We just see the head turn. I thought that was very effective. And then, you know, after the invisible embrace, which that was one thing that reminded me of the entity. And, you know, you can tell she's happy and she's like, Owen, you're here. But you just hear the voice say, I'm not Owen. And then that's when the music kind of picks up, the door slams. And I was kind of like, oh shit. Now it's really getting interesting because just when you think you found this movie out, and then it's like she's getting dragged through the house, and again, all the architecture where it's like in her line of view to look like another shape of a person. It looks like it's turning towards her. That happens a few times. Always looked cool. It looked like hallways are stretching out. And normally this would have taken me out of the movie. I would have been like, okay, this clearly is not happening. Because as far as we know, this is still real. This is still happening. We find out she's technically in a dream state. But like when the hallway, you know, expands, she's like dragged down it. And as she looks at each room, she sees Owen killing one of the women. And then she's like picked up, elevated, and sort of held in that hogtie position. And the house goes dark, and completely dark, but like this red light over her. Very Argento looking. Looks awesome. The cinematography for the whole film is excellent. But the revelation is, and actually I think it's before she gets in that position, but she walks into the living room and sees Owen sitting on the couch with a woman laying with her head in his lap. And she says, if you're not Owen, then who are you? And this entity in Owen's body refers to himself as nothing. Because there is a plot point earlier in the film where she tells a coworker and her closest friend that years ago, when she lived in a different state, she was in a car accident with a friend and she died. Heart stopped for 4 minutes, declared dead, but she came back. And everyone always asked her what she saw, what is there, and you know, she told them lies like, oh, I saw this, I saw that, but in reality, I saw nothing. And the note that Owen left behind said, you were right, there is nothing after you, you're safe now. And she never quite knew what exactly that meant. Now we find out that the entity the entire time was nothing. And it's this demon who she saw when she died in the car accident. And the reason why Owen was this serial killer and why all the victims looked like her was, and why he had this separate house but made in reverse, was because this demon was not really possessing him, but influencing him to kill Beth and send her back to him. So he was taking all these, her name is Beth, I never even said that, Beth lookalikes to a house lookalike to kill her in some manner that would also fight off dark forces. But eventually, nothing saw through his trick and pretty much made him kill himself. And this is what made me, this is what saved the movie for me, because I was like, okay, he's a serial killer, but maybe all these supernatural elements are to help her find out, or something along those lines. But then when I found out that there was this demon, and saying like how, oh, I've always been there. I was always just whispering in his ear to get him to, you know, trying to get him to do you in, actually. And so I was thinking like, oh, it just, did they just happen to move in where there's a demon and it took hold of him, or some stupid shit that you would see in any lesser horror movie. But then you find out that no, he was doing all this to satiate nothing, but to also protect Beth. So, kind of morally ambiguous, I guess. And then it ends with her in the rowboat in the lake with Owen as he was when he died, but she's talking to nothing, has his gun, and he's trying to convince her to kill herself. He'll say, if there's really nothing, go ahead. And there is nothing, just me. She asks where Owen is, and he's like, he's gone. But by this time, and I really like how this was shot. It helps show that she's really deep in the dream world, because it's like nighttime, but with this like red beam over them. Like there's two moons actually. A white one, a regular one and a red one. I'm guessing to show that there's like two planes. But by now, her friend has shown up to check on her, because after she found the bodies, she called her and left her a voicemail. She walks in, sees that the house it is a mess, realizes that Owen's gun is gone, sees her out in the boat, knows what's about to go down, and runs after her. The elderly friend is nearby, hears the friend calling to her, so they rush out to the dock. And it's this wonderful build-up. This is how you do suspense. It keeps going from bright, sunny daylight of the friend trying to get her attention, in the dark nighttime with the red moonlight dream world, both of which she's holding the gun, and it keeps flashing back and forth. She's sitting in the same position, like tilting the gun, and just the music is building up, and it's just going back and forth, and you're just like, it actually had to be like, what's gonna happen? But the friend swims out, grabs her, they get her back to the dock, and she snaps out of it, but she's staring at the boat still, and the friend says, there's nothing there. But we see her vision, there's like a black, transparent shadow sitting in the boat. She says, I know. Now that could either be taken as, I know there's nothing there, meaning she's overcome everything, meaning sort of the metaphor for overcoming her grief, or there's nothing there, meaning nothing is there, and he'll always be there, he'll always be after me. I guess it can go either way. It's left fairly ambiguous enough. But yeah, I loved this movie. This is my kind of pacing. It took the time to tell its story. The visuals are amazing. They're subtle enough to really be eerie and creepy without being over the top. It's CGI, but it's very seamless. It's just this constant state of dread and suspense, all up until that very suspenseful moment with the pistol in the rowboat going back and forth between real world and dream world. The performances, especially Rebecca Hall, awesome, great. She really carries the film. You really feel for her. You can really, you feel bad for her when she's grieving, and you really want her to figure everything out, even when it's something that nobody would want to hear, like when she's talking to the woman about the affair, but she doesn't know the details, and she's letting her tell the story, and she's just sitting there taking it. It's just like, you really want to go through this. It's a great story about grief and how to overcome it. This is how you do a supernatural, horror movie, where the supernatural elements are, again, subtle enough to be effective and interesting. And this movie was spooky. This had some genuinely freaky moments. Again, with the way that architecture tricked her to make it look like a human profile that turns its head, or when all the women in the background were running by or falling off the cliff. This is a genuinely creepy movie. Very effective. And yeah, there's a reason it's one of my top favorites so far of the 2020s. I mean, again, it's up there with The Invisible Man, Censor, The Feast. Other ones I really enjoy that I would put this over would be like Antlers, Men, X. Even though Men and X are close to being in my favorites, as is Last Night in Soho. I liked this way more than Malignant. I still like Malignant, but excellent, excellent movie. This is one of those where everything across the board works. It is effective to the fullest extent. Direction, writing, cinematography, the visuals, atmosphere, just the feeling, the emotional ride of just tension, suspense, dread, writing, if I didn't say that already. Excellent movie. Highly recommend it. Definitely one of the best of the 2020s. Well worth the wait. And yeah, this is how you do supernatural and psychological horror. Yes, it is a horror movie. Doesn't matter how slow or psychological it is. I loved it. That's The Night House. Thank you for watching.